You know, they always say in hockey, one player can make a difference in the right place at the right time. The New York Islanders from 1975 to the 79 playoffs were knocking at the door, but could barely smash it down. They lost two series against Montreal back to back in 75 and 76 and 77. Lost to the Leafs in upsets in 78, and lost to the Rangers in upset in 79, despite the fact having a lot of key players: Gillies, Trottier, Nystrom, Bossy, Potvin, Resch, Billy Smith. But the 1980 season, they were different. Even though they didn't have their best regular season, they were a money team in the playoffs. Now, this was the eighth campaign in franchise's history. Now, during the year, the Islanders dropped below the 100-point mark for the first time in 5 years, earning only 91 points. Now, they were number one overall in the previous season, ahead of Montreal. A lot of people predicting a Montreal Islanders series, but never came about. They finished second in the Patrick and second in the Campbell. Were only plus 34 in goal, as we say. Scored 281 and gave up 247. Now the big team, led by GM Bill Torrey and longtime head coach Al Arbour, Denny Potvin took over the captaincy from the very versatile Clark Gillies, and I think this was a big factor as well. Now, before the playoffs, Torrey made the difficult decision to trade longtime and popular veterans Billy Harris, yes, that Billy Harris, and defenseman Dave Lewis to the Kings for second-line center Butch Goring, who was a star in semi-star in LA for years. Goring is often called the final piece of the puzzle, a strong two-way player, as his presence on the second line ensures that opponents will no longer be able to focus their defensive efforts on the Isles' first line of Bossy, Trottier, and Gillies. Now, contributions from new teammates, such as the recently drafted Dwayne Sutter and Anders Kluwer, and stay-at-home defenseman Gord Lane and Ken Morrow coming over from the Olympic team, who won a gold medal in Lake Placid, also figured prominently in Islanders' playoff success. Now, a great draft for Islanders that year: Dwayne Sutter, Thomas Janssen, Billy Carroll, and of course Rolly the goalie Melanson, a favorite of everybody from New Brunswick. Now, the Flyers finished ahead in the standings. Ironically, that's who they would play in the final. The Flyers were ahead by 25 points. Now, a very, very interesting campaign for the Islanders because they were having some difficulty against bigger opponents. Now, you're talking about what happened with the Detroit, a strong team. They went 1-3 in Detroit that year, but for the majority of the campaign, they played even or better against all the major squads. Now, in October, they went 4-3-2. A terrible November, 2-8-2, and 6-11-4. You weren't playing Stanley Cup hockey, but December went 7-4-2. January 10-4-1. February 6-6-1. March 8-3-4, and April undefeated 2-0-1. But the big thing, ladies and gentlemen, the Nassau Magic in January are 8-2-1 on the road. That was a very interesting month, ladies and gentlemen, because they only played 4 games on the road that full month. So, started the season terribly. We lost 3 of the first 4 games. Lost 5 of 6 from November 9th to November 21st. And then we're getting knocked off by the lowly Colorado Rockies in November. But once January came along, you had a streak of 9 wins in 10 games in January, including a big 2-1 victory over Montreal. Now, the last of the season was strong as well. They went 7-0-4 to go undefeated the last 11. So, a very, very impressive tally. The only tie they had in that mix was the Montreal Canadiens. Now, the playoffs was an interesting mix, ladies and gentlemen. The Islanders were ironically playing the Kings in the first round. Now, they won 8-1 in the opener, 6-3 in game 2, 4-3 in overtime at the Forum, and 6-0 in the final game, like their offense was just flying. The first game, Trottier, Merrick, Trottier again, Bossy, Nystrom, Gordy Lane, Trottier's hat-trick, and Stefan Persson scored for the winners. In the second game, it was again the big offensive players for the Islanders. It was Lost the second game 6-3. I apologize. I was partaking of it wrong. Bobby Bourne, John Tonelli, and Gary Howitt led the way. The big win, of course, was the 4-3 overtime victory in Game 3, where Ken Morrow, who was a money player then and into his career, scored the winner in the first overtime period. In the last game, ladies and gentlemen, of all people, Alex McKendry scored 2 in the postseason to lead the victors. Now, in the second series, and a lot of people were anticipating this, ladies and gentlemen, they played the Boston Bruins. Now, they won the opener 2-1 at the Garden in overtime. Then they won 5-4 in overtime again in the Garden. Started hot in Game 3 and won 5-3 overall. And Boston was winning an inch of elimination at Nassau in Game 4, but they staved off elimination with a 4-3 overtime victory. And the Islanders won again back at Boston Garden. So in the first game, ladies and gentlemen, Clark Gillies had an overtime winner at 102. And again, Bobby Bourne was the hero in Game 2. A lot of people felt Boston was going to give him a hard shake, but the Islanders were just much too strong, especially in the second and third period. Now here it gets kind of freaky, ladies and gentlemen. The Gilbert Perreault-led Buffalo Sabres, a lot of people said it was going to be the last gasp for the squad. The Islanders did not have home ice advantage in the series. They played the first 2 games at the Odd in Buffalo and won 4-1 and 2-1 in a very exciting double overtime game. Back in Nassau, they won 7-4, but the Sabres put under pressure in Game 4, winning 7-4. They came back to the Odd, won 2-0, and the Islanders secured the victory in the last game. And of course, the big counter, again, Bobby Nystrom. This is not going to be a broken record. He scored a big overtime winner, 120 of the second overtime. And the key point for the Islanders, ladies and gentlemen, was again Mike Bossy, Tonelli, and Bobby Bourne. Bobby Bourne had a tremendous series. He scored 10 goals in the first 3 campaigns. Now, overtime magic for the Islanders continued against the Flyers. A lot of people felt that the Flyers had enough to beat the Islanders, but at the Spectrum, and he didn't have home ice advantage, ladies and gentlemen, for this series as well. It was Dennis Potvin on the power play at 4:07, the first overtime gave the victory. Now the Islanders had trailed late before Stefan Pearson scored a big counter, 3:42 left to send it in extra time. The game 2 at the Spectrum was all Flyers, who won 8-2, but back at Nassau, the Islanders had 6-2 and 5-2 back-to-back victories. 6-3 back at the Spectrum. 3-2 going for the infamous Jim Houston call, where basically Tonelli and Nystrom put the Flyers, out of their misery. Reggie Leach again had a great tournament, ladies and gentlemen. He scored his 9th of the postseason at 7:21 to give the Flyers an early lead, but Potvin tied it up, followed by Dwayne Sutter, but Brian Propp responded to make it 2-2 after the first. Now in the second, it was all Islanders. Bossy and Nystrom scored, but in the third, ladies and gentlemen, 2 unforeseen scorers, Bob Daly and John Paddock, of all people, scored to make it tie it up and send it overtime. Of course, Nystrom's big goal on a feed from Tonelli at 7:11. So you're saying to yourself, what did the Islanders do in 1979-80 you couldn't do in the years previous? Well, here's the deal. Having Goring there opened it up quite a bit. Now, they had the influence of many Europeans, and of course Bobby Nystrom is European, but Stefan Pearson, Andres Galore, and but what Goring did, he could play defense but also play offense. So you didn't have to waste time stopping the top players on the other team. Now, overtime magic only goes so far, ladies and gentlemen. But you got to understand, they had 1 big overtime victory against the Kings, 2 big overtime victories against the Bruins, against the Sabres. Again, overtime was on their side. Not saying they were playing defensively, but Nystrom's goal, and in the final, of course, that first game, and of course game 6. The Flyers winning the opening game. Flyers winning the opening game 4-3. I mean, the Islanders when they opened the game 4-3 was a slight surprise because the Spectrum was really rocking that night. Now, the season was quite interesting. Trottier had 104 points in an off season. Bossy only had 51 goals. If you can say this, Clark Gilly had 54 points, going 19 counters. Anders Kalor, a very strong season, 22 goals, and of course Bobby Nostrom had 21. And Sutter, as a young player, contributed a lot. He had 15 goals, and about Goring in his short time in the regular season had 11 points in 12 games, and Ken Morrow was strong as well. Now, ironically, Richard Brodeur was the number 3 goalie that season. Now, in the postseason, it was a team effort all the way. Bossy was missing for a number of games in the postseason, but Trottier led all scorers with 29 points in 21 games. Bossy had 10 counters in 16 matches. Bourne went 10, 10, 20, and 21 contests. Butchie Goring had 19 points in 21 games, while the quarterback Dennis Potvin had 19 points in 21 games, while Nystrom was fourth on a team in scoring with 9 counters in 20 matches. Now, Billy Smith took most of the work in the postseason, and I think Brian Trottier winning the Conn Smythe was more than deserving. He was the catalyst in a lot of the big goals, but ironically, ladies and gentlemen, that's somebody we don't talk about much. Those 2 goals by Alex McKendry. I know that doesn't really ring a bell when you talk about him, but those 2 counters were very important in the scheme of things, because when you get a substitute player that comes in and does something what he did, that's friggin' amazing. He only played 2 games in a regular season and had 2 goals and 2 assists in the postseason, and what he called a 6-game wonder, and he wasn't a big NHL factor from then on. And we're going to be doing a feature on McHenry down the road, because he was a high prospect of 40 Islanders, and even though it didn't pan out, he did get a Stanley Cup ring. Now, ladies and gentlemen, good followers of the Islanders, like Joe Powers, our member that runs the Independent Authors Association, all the Islander fans in the Maritimes, their concept of trying to explain why the Islanders didn't win the Cup until they won the Cup, there's no explanation. There's the different factors going on. But like I said, you have Buffalo, the Flyers, Montreal, Rangers, Toronto. In that time of the NHL, you had 6 or 7 teams that were there every year, and they were pretty well fighting it out. Not saying the original 6, but I call them the strong 7. They were capable of beating each other. Rangers were capable of beating each other. Islanders were capable of being beat by somebody else. But Butch Goring was a big factor. You have to remember, they didn't have a good season. Regular season in 1980, lost a lot of key games. They were trying to decide on Chico Resch and Billy Smith, and after this season, he chose Billy Smith, and that was a big factor as well. So that's the story of the 1979-80 New York Islanders, a more than deserving cup, and it's tremendous to see fans in Nassau. They were literally the 6th person on the ice. Tremendous fans in Nassau, and that place was rocking. And it had, you know what they say, ghosts of Horror? There was a spirit in Nassau Coliseum. If you watch those games, you could feel the energy from the fans to the players. It was just amazing, and that's why a lot of people across Canada became Islander fans, because that break in Nassau was tremendous. And you got to understand, he bet Gretzky in his prime there as well in 1983 for the last cup. Anyway, the Islanders, the Dynasty Islanders, again, a very significant period in NHL history where the best team finally won in 4 straight seasons. Thanks for listening. Bye.